Today I wanted to share with you some of my video of Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens. It's one thing you'll see I take a lot of video of and a lot of pictures of for several reasons. It's a great place to go, and it's close to my house. That's probably the biggest benefit of living where I live. This park is literally right beside where I live. The park's coming up on 500 years of age. It was originally purchased by Henry VIII and made into his private hunting grounds. Later on, it was redesigned a little bit in Hyde Park. The western portion was made into Kensington Garden, and they added a man-made waterway there in the center called the Serpentine. And it was dammed up. It was like a river that flowed through and widened. So it's the boundary marker, I guess you could say, between Hyde Park and the western portion of Hyde Park, which is now Kensington Garden. It's the Kensington Garden that I wanted to mention today a little more specifically. While the whole park has a lot of history behind it, Kensington Garden has a really neat aspect in that it was inspired the Peter Pan series of plays and novels and later feature films. It was here that an author named J.M. Barrie wrote a play, The Little White Bird, and it featured a character named Peter Pan. Now, Peter Pan was originally, the character was inspired by his brother. His brother had died while 13 years old, the day before he turned 14, in an ice skating accident. And his mother referred to his brother as the boy who would never grow old because he died so young. So this inspired the Peter Pan character, the boy who would never grow up. And later on, in the park, he would meet with some boys that he met there. Their last name were Davies, and there was 5 brothers. And this was the inspiration for the Lost Boys. And their parents died pretty young, so he ended up unofficially adopting these 5 boys, financially supported them, put them through college, and the middle child's name was Peter. Now, the Peter name was inspired by this boy, but the character itself was inspired by his brother. So anyway, he made Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, and it was all based around this area, which is in Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens. Now, after the book was published in 1906, Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, he went on and wrote a little bit more about that, and it was a runaway success at that time, and inspired a lot of stuff afterwards. But it was here in this one spot where they used to feed birds. He decided after the success of the book he wanted to have a sculpture commissioned and made out of bronze, and he had that done, and he couldn't get permission to put it in the park. The park at the time said, we can't give you permission to put it here, but if you were to put it here, wink wink, we won't protest it. And so he did. He had it installed at midnight, and he had an article put in the paper that the fairies had delivered something where the kids feed the birds in Kensington Gardens, at this spot here. So the next day, as people woke up and they came into Kensington Gardens, they got to see this statue that was just appeared overnight. And this is the Peter Pan statue right beside the Serpentine. And it is in the spot where he used to meet with the Davies brothers, and they would feed the birds and whatnot. This is pretty interesting that he had it placed exactly where he wanted it, and exactly at the section of the park that they used to hang out at. Now here's the statue itself. It's right behind the waterway that you were just looking at. Now, for most people, this is the only thing you'll see of Peter Pan in the whole park, and it doesn't allude to the fact that there's something even across the on the westernmost portion that was mentioned and also illustrated in the book that's worthy of seeing if you've read it or you're a fan of Peter Pan. So if you look at a map of Hyde Park, this statue is on the western side of the Serpentine, about midways. Now to see something else that's really interesting and also related to this story, you have to go to the westernmost edge of the park. Now this is Kensington Palace. It's on the western side of Kensington Garden, and this is what you need to look for when you get there, the statue of Queen Victoria. Now from this point you need to walk north on this very large road here, and it will be, I'll show you here, I'll pan over. You can see it barely from the road with your eye. Now the camera is so zoomed out, it's very hard to tell where it is, but I'll point it out so it's easy to find. It took a long time to actually find these stones that we were looking for. My daughter eventually found them, but they were off in that tree there. Now what you're looking for are two stones beneath a tree. What you're seeing now is an illustration from the actual book published in 1906. It shows two stones, and you'll notice one stone has a little bit of a point to it, and the other one's flat on the top. The one on the left side has PP, and the other one has WSTM. So in the book, he made this out to be burial stones. Peter Pan would find babies that had died and bury them in the park. And this was one of the illustrations in the book. And today you can see that these stones are actually still here. So let me explain what these are and what they're not. I'll start with what they're not. They're not actually gravestones, and nobody's buried here. But he incorporated this into the book. These stones are actually parish boundary line stones. But if you look, one has the initials PP on it. And the character in the book was Phoebe Phelps. And Phoebe Phelps was supposedly buried at this spot. Anyway, I thought it was interesting that he had blended things he had actually seen in the park with his book and his storyline. This is one of those bits of history that's just off the beaten path and almost forgotten and known by very few people. So I thought it was worth a mention, and I wanted to show a video of it. So anyway, if you want to read an interesting story, look up the Davies Brothers, which were the Lost Boys' inspiration to J.M. Barrie. And it's a really tragic story. Only 2 out of the 5 lived to have full lives. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. And this has been my video on Kensington Garden, Hyde Park, with relation to the Peter Pan inspiration.